This is Olivia Green interviewing Mykel Hunter for the HBCU Radio Preservation Project. It is currently 10:33 a.m. on December 3rd, 2025, and this interview is being recorded at WEAA in Baltimore, Maryland. Thank you so much, Mykel, for sitting down with me today.
Well, thank you, Olivia. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and before I get into the questions first, can you please just state your full name and your relationship to WEAA for the record?
All right. I am Mykel Hunter, on-air personality and also student internship training manager.
Great. And can you tell me when and where you were born?
Baltimore, Maryland. And women never tell their age, so can we skip that part?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
And so for somebody who maybe has never been to Baltimore, has no context about the city, how would you describe what it was like to grow up in Baltimore?
Growing up in Baltimore was great because my community was family. So there was always someone looking over me or after me if mom or dad wasn't present. I grew up with a lot of people that I'm still friends with now. We had a close-knit community, and outside of the community, the beautification of Baltimore is very inviting. The businesses, the energy, and especially as we grow Baltimore, it has gotten very savvy in arts and entertainment. It's a mecca for family and a mecca for people who want to become entrepreneurs and thrive in the city. Plus, there's great seafood here.
And can you tell me a little bit about the people that raised you?
The people that raised me, my family, my aunts, my uncles. My uncles were like dads, my dad, my brother, and just the community, just great. I mean, there was one woman who never missed anything in the community. She happened to live right next door to me. So when mom and dad were at work, I had another mother next door, or the woman across who had maybe 10 kids, and she looked after the whole community. The respect, the camaraderie, family took care of family, neighbors took care of neighbors, and we cared about each other. So it was different than the Baltimore we see today, where younger people don't have the same respect for their neighbor, aging adults. So it's different today. I was in Walmart just the other day, and my card wouldn't swipe. And I asked the young lady, I said, hey, I'm having problems. Can you help me? She said, just swipe it. I said, okay, I've done that. I'm still having problems. She said, I told you, which made me say, oh, boy, I'm an aging adult. I'm an adult. You don't tell me. You show me if I'm asking for your help. So I asked an older woman for her help. She said, I can't because I'm over here. So the young lady came over and she gave me help. She said, turn your card this way. I said, that's all I was asking you. I said, you look like my niece, remind me of my niece as I look at you, but her behavior was different. And that is sometimes the energy of young people today. But when you get a young man or a young woman who will hold the door for you as you're walking in or out, it's so wonderful to see that. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And you want to give them the same level of respect right back so they can feel it and know how much you appreciate it. So, yeah, that's where I'm at today. And I got to say, the older woman sort of condoned her behavior. And that was it.
That's interesting. And I will have follow-up questions kind of about that conceptually because I know that you do a lot of work here with students, obviously. Mm-hmm. But why do you attribute that change, or how do you attribute that change? What do you think has happened in the community where we're now seeing this kind of disconnect between generation and behavior and respect?
I think some time ago what happened was we listened to more defamatory lyrics and music. We listened to the misogyny of male rappers, and we were in clubs where the word bitch was acceptable. I was in a nightclub in Atlanta where I used to work, and this was a long time ago, and the DJ say, all of the in the house, raise your hand. I could have fallen out. Every woman in the house, it appeared, raised her hand. So those terms have become, I guess, colorfully accepted in certain cultures of that are energized by the music they support. But then on the other hand, you'll have a young man, my nephew, who's a DJ. He plays everything you want to hear, old school, new school, hip hop, rap. But he's so respectful and so engaged in the culture and the energy of everything that promotes positivity and growth.
Mm. And so, kind of talking about music and circling back to you as a young person, what kind of music were you listening to in the house growing up?
I listened to what my family listened to, what my dad listened to, what my mom listened to. So it was the classics of Aretha Franklin, Johnny Bristol. I was a fan of Johnny Taylor. I don't know who turned me on to him. And my aunt used to listen a lot to Ray Charles. So she was my babysitter. And I grew up with that kind of music, and listening to the lyrics of that, I quietly began to like country music because it told a story. And if the music tells a story and not braggadocious, I'm with it.
Yeah. What are your earliest memories of radio?
I think my earliest memory of radio is having butterflies every time I walked into the studio to open the mic. And I had one person, he was so entrenched in the community. Everyone loved him. He had a great voice and presence. And that environment, we too were family. But he said to me, if you walk in, you open the mic, you don't get butterflies, it's time to go. I'll always remember that.
So was this you as a kid being exposed to the studio, or did that happen later on? Were you listening to the radio as a child?
Oh, yeah. I grew up listening to the radio. My mother used to listen to radio ministries. She listened to some shows, but she really listened to ministries on radio. Played music at home, though. Her albums, her 45s. I happened to listen to the radio at night because it was calming. The songs were slow, and they were supposed to be love songs in a love show. So, yeah.
And at that point in time, did you see yourself on the mic one day?
No. I actually saw myself on TV.
Okay.
That's what I initially pursued. So I had an opportunity to work at a local station here in Baltimore as a student intern. I was with a group, and I was selected to work at a TV station. But when I got to TV, I had a misconception that every smiling face on the TV were nice people. It was just the opposite. I saw a lot of aggression. I saw a lot of separatism. And I did not see nice people. I didn't. And then there was separatism from a black HBCU in Towson State University, which is not black. So the people that I worked around seemed to favor those of a non-HBCU. But I had a gentleman, and I'll tell this story a lot, who was Irish. He took me out. We did street reporting. I had the ability and the opportunity to write. He taught me what I knew in TV. And then on the weekends, it was a different kind of environment because it was more laid back. It was opening. It was inviting. I learned a lot from the assignment editors, male and female, who became people that I admire to this day. Both have retired just recently. But so I saw the not so attractive side of TV. I remember one lady, and I happened to find a picture of me talking to her at a, what do you call it, when they come to your school and they have conversations and with everyone. So I was talking to her, and I was looking very intense at her because of what I thought she was sharing. But now I remember it was kind of an empty thought because I couldn't remember anything that was impactful. I started working with her. The day that she packed up her little box and left, she said, "I'll put in a good word for you," and she was gone. And there was one woman that I so admired. Oh, I thought she was the best on TV. I went back to her desk and I asked her to help me grow what I was doing in some way or another. And she shied away from me like, I just want to do my job, as if she was in fear. And that was it. And then I saw how some of the viewers were very unkind to the talent that was on TV, whether their hair was nice or it wasn't nice, whether or not they got too fat. And I was like, wow, they're taking a lot. But they were mean people behind the mic, behind the camera. They weren't nice at all. Yeah. Would I go back into TV being the woman that I am today? Yes.
And what would you take with you?
Everything that I've learned, that it's business and it's not personal.
I hear you. So I want to circle back to kind of the things that you were interested in or consumed by as a young person, even before college. Mm-hmm. What kind of community institutions was your family a part of? Were you guys involved in the church or other kind of community projects?
My brother was involved in Boy Scouts, of course, and he was involved in the recreation center where he had some kind of role where that was his community. That brought him up. He expanded from the household to his level of independence. My mother was a spiritual person who believed in spirituality. She believed in praying. We have a large family, so outside of our immediate family, everyone was connected in some kind of way or another. For me, I wanted to be a doctor. However, I didn't want to wear a dress, and it was very narrow thinking because I wasn't taught that a woman could be a doctor, that we had to be a nurse. All of the women in my family were nurses. My mother was a nurse, two of my aunts, but I wanted that type of, I would say, power, and I wanted to give something that I thought was more worthy of being a nurse, although I admired and learned to appreciate that level of medical care. From that, I wanted to go into politics. So I think it may have been before school or my first year in school at Morgan. I'm a graduate of Morgan as well. I was working for the Baltimore Communications Department here, and I would go to City Hall and sit in on some of the meetings when my supervisor couldn't do it. I loved it. I just knew I was in the right place at the right time. I used to, from there, I would write and also coordinate a program that we did maybe once a month. No, it was every Wednesday. It was called Every Wednesday, where the talent of the city government would get together and do a talent show at lunchtime. So that kind of gave me an idea of what I could do. But I think I got sidetracked when I came to college, and somehow I got into radio. From wanting to do TV, having that experience after one summer was more than enough. That was it. So doctor, medical field, politics, TV, and then radio is my career. Yep.
Yeah. So what made you decide that Morgan State was the right place to go to college?
I don't know what took me to Morgan. It was either Morgan or Howard. I didn't want to be far from home. Mm-hmm. So Morgan was a bus trip and Howard was a little different. I thought that I was going to transfer to Howard at some point, but then I decided to say at Morgan. I wanted the experience to be around people that I had something in common with, people that I felt comfortable with, and sororities that gave me more opportunities to blend opposed to working to fit in.
Yeah. So did you come in as a communications major knowing that TV was your goal at the time?
I did, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And can you tell me a little bit about some of the organizations that you were involved in as a student?
Well, I was the president of the Communications Center here on the campus of Morgan State University. I also pledged Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, AKA, and anything that had to do with media, I was part of it. And so I think for the communications department, we had a group of people in one little building, which was actually called Holmes Hall. Excuse me. I wasn't there for the nomination, but I asked my best friend, could she nominate me for something other than president? And when the results came out, I was nominated for president, and I became president. And I wore the role well. I did well in it. Some of the things we did, we put on different presentations. We had meetings to really strengthen the department. It was a small department at the time. We had probably just a handful of professors. One professor, his name was Dr. Kennedy. And Dr. Kennedy was, he was a challenge for me. He was a challenge for me because in my family, we were very much engraved in Black history. Dr. Kennedy, I saw as an opposition of teaching and sharing Black history. He didn't look like me or anybody I knew. So my assumption is that he was different. I remember doing a presentation. It may have been on Angela Davis, and he tore it apart. I took it home. I discussed it with my family. And Dr. Kennedy and I became friends because he taught me something and I taught him bravery and stubbornness. Not that I was always right, but if I was wrong, I wanted to know why and show me the facts that would change it or support what you're saying. And he did. And he became one of the professors that I admired in addition to another professor by the name of Dr. Janet Dates, who was another great, great professor for me to grow my interest in communications. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're doing this presentation on Angela Davis, about what year is that?
It had to be in the 80s.
Okay.
It was early 80s, yeah.
And so at the time, can you kind of describe to me the campus culture, the issues that were important to students, either citywide or nationally?
It seemed as if the culture and the energy of the campus was, I'm Black and I'm proud. You had your bell bottoms, your platforms, your afros, your sisters and your brothers, and everything was so beautiful. And I think then we recognize more of the beauty in us. We recognize that we were not different, although some of the dialects may have been different. I met people from other countries. I became friends with people that just weren't from Baltimore, but from parts of Africa. I had a very rich African friend. His name was Kola, and he was just beautiful. He dressed in suits every day. He drove nice cars. And so I began to expand my knowledge of the movement then, because there was a movement and there was more unity among young Black people. And that was a moment of pride. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember any student protests or action that happened on campus while you were here?
No. Mm-mm.
And were you part of student media, working as a reporter or covering issues in the city at all?
I covered everything on one side of the campus, and that was in the communications department. We had the student newspaper, and with the student newspaper, there were issues that we would integrate in, and there were people who did that. But for me, I would say that I led my team, but I knew where their strong points were and where mine was. My strong point was talking, representing, and convincing people if they needed to be convinced from one thing to another. And I think that was me, but there were members of the spokesman, which was very powerful back then, because the spokesman was not, they were fearless. They shared knowledge, they shared information, but it wasn't random. It was studied, it was dissected, and I would go to the student center where the spokesman was to pick up whatever I could pick up. If I had to sit in the student lounge and watch people walk by, I did that because I wanted to feel what they were sharing. So I would go to the spokesman's newspaper, and they were so engaged in what they were doing, you wanted to be part of the whole scene. So if I couldn't get into that area, then my area was where I was, which was supporting the written part of communications. Mine was vocal, theirs was written. And so, yeah, that's where it was, yep.
And so what do you begin to learn about yourself as a leader and as a communicator at this point in your life?
That as a communicator and as a leader, I was a different person because I'm an introvert. And so being around people, even at that young age, who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, not being present when you're voting and being nominated as president was powerful for me. So what I saw in me is that, one, I was pleasant but not approachable. And I still see that. I'm pleasant, but I'm not always approachable. And that's because people, I guess I'm not, how would I say it? You can't really see the writing on the wall until you actually start reading it.
What was the student body's relationship to WEAA while you were a student here?
I worked at WEAA as a student. Thank you for reminding me. Their relationship with the students was very selective because I don't know how I got to WEAA as a student intern. I don't even know. I think I was taking the class with Kwesi Mfume. He was the program director at the time, and so I think that's how I got to WEAA. I didn't know anything about being on the air, wanting to be on the air. I started working in promotions. As a student, there weren't many students there. Most of the people were paid professionals. And there was a couple of students there that were really sharp, that were fast, that were on the move. And there was one young lady, I admired her because she was a rebel rouser. She was like an Angela Davis on the air. And then there was an art student that was at Morgan, WEAA. I admired him because of his illustration. So it was so much to see and do. And there were other people who really knew jazz. Back then, WEAA, for the most part, was mainstream jazz and talk shows. There was a show on by Mary Carter Smith, who was a black griot. When she told the stories of the Mid-Atlantic and slavery and racism and community and sounds and messages worn through your hair, colorful clothing. Her stories were so lavishly, vocally, and orally illustrated. You could see it as she was talking. So growing up with that, I always tell my students, do not read this. I want you to deliver it. It's an empty canvas. Color the canvas with what you're saying. Let me see this. Because radio is theater of mind. I can't see anything. But for me, working amongst the professionals, I wanted to be them. So I worked hard to show that I was qualified to do the job and areas that were missing. One of the things I started doing was promotions. So many jazz artists coming to town, so many artists coming to town. I remember getting tickets for a concert for Al Jarreau and Whitney Houston. We gave them away on air. Staff signed up for them. But I didn't know the value between sales and marketing. Because if we're going to give away tickets, we needed to get sales to support our giveaway. But I didn't know about that part. No one said, hey, Mykel, we need that client to buy airtime so we can actually give away tickets. Don't just get a stack of tickets and give them away to people. And we're saying on the air, hey, hey, hey. It sound good, but it didn't make sense. So throughout my career, I began to see the importance of sales and marketing going so well together and how it financially grew the station, how you were able to perhaps keep your job and so forth and so on.
Yeah, and so it seems like what I hear you saying is through your experience here as a student, you start connecting what it means to deliver story on air, to read the news, to have that community impact and connection with your audience, and what it means to sustain your ability to do that. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between kind of the persona and what that means to be on air and also to have the business mind? Because sometimes they don't always go together.
There was another thing about being a student at WEAA, and I do this with my students, so I have to draw back and think about where I put them. They wanted to put me in news. I didn't want to do news. I didn't think I could deliver the news. We had a man by the name of Lamont Germany. Absolutely amazing. He could rip and read, and it was a delivery, not a read. But he would rip it off of AP Newswire, and he would tell the story as if it was written by him. And you would understand everything he said. He wouldn't stumble. He wouldn't flub. If he did, he made it sound like it was part of the whole story. I didn't do that until I got on the air. So there was a separation in personality. When I got on the air, I became someone that I didn't know. I became someone who was reserved but very relatable. I touched people and didn't know it because I was told later in my career, much, much later, that you don't talk at people, you talk to them. When you talk to them, they're able to hear your conversation and to feel it. When people say to me, Mykel, thank you, I felt that. It could be in the music. It could be in something I said. I don't talk a lot. But what I do say, I've always have been told to say something that has purpose, that has an impact, and I did. So, and that talent grew. I used to be my mother's DJ at home playing her records. And so I began to love music, but I loved TV, and I wanted to be on TV, not for the appearance, but because I thought that I could relate. Unfortunately, and I would tell anyone who wants to go into that field, don't let anybody kill your dreams, no matter what energy you get from them. Because in radio, much later in life, I experienced some things that I was like, oh my God, I've never. And it could have been based on who I was and my background. because sometimes people aren't comfortable with your level of growth or success.
Yes. And to clarify, when you talk about your first time being on air, was that as a student or was that after you finished?
Let's see. I think it was as a student.
Okay.
It was as a student. I did a midday show from 10 until whenever I had to go to class. I think it was 2 hours maybe. But I didn't know the music. I couldn't learn the music because I didn't like it. It was jazz. It was Miles Davis and mainstream John Coltrane. I'm like, who are these people? I didn't like it. I had to pick my own music. I didn't know how to flow. I didn't know what would go after the next song, but I got through it. And I remember getting calls at the radio station, not based on the music, but based on the personality. So although I was a loner who pledged the sorority, I would have to call every morning and give my big sister the weather report. And it was the personality that saved me. And it was the personality that grew me and groomed me in this career of media, this aspect of media. So that helped me a lot, yeah.
And was your experience at WEAA before or after your TV internship?
It was, let's see. It was a summer of WEAA.
Okay.
Yeah, it was one of my summer internships. Yeah.
So you're kind of understanding the cultures of these mediums simultaneously. So can you talk to me about what you did after graduation?
Boy, after graduation, I worked for a call center, and it was MCI. That was the name of the call center. Because I was really entrenched in this media thing, I didn't like being in a office with computers. I would walk in every day and say, oh God, these computers are making me sick. Something's wrong. Something's coming from these computers. So I would cut up. I found a group of friends at lunch. We would just act like crazy. And people would call, it was USA Today newspaper. People would call and complain and say, hey, they threw the paper on my lawn and the sprinkler went off. I want to be reimbursed. And if my coworker or myself weren't nice to the people, we would play each other's supervisor. And that was a job that I just did not like. But it was maintaining me financially. But I also was working part-time in D.C. at Kathy Hughes, who is a radio mogul, radio station on the weekends. But upstairs from the call center was USA Today. So I would go in, and at times when I wasn't being a bad girl, I'd look upstairs and say, that's where I want to be. I want to be up there with the journalists. So one day I went up there, and I just stood inside, and I ran into Dwayne Wickham, who is the dean, or was the dean of Morgan State University School of Global Journalism. And I was a big fan. I followed all of his newscasts, his stories, and I wanted to work for USA Today. But I also wanted to work in radio. But I knew I was a good writer. So somehow or another, I finally left USA Today, and I worked, had a good part-time job, I would say, with Magic 102.3, which was one of Kathy Hughes' first radio stations, first FM radio stations. So I worked part-time with them, and then I became, I worked overnight, full-time. And that was my introduction to real commercial radio.
Yeah. Can you tell me about your first day on the job there and what that felt like?
It's kind of hard to remember my first day on the job, but some of the thrills there for me was listening to the station. I listened to the station. I was elated by the music. I was a supporter of all of the talent that was on air. There was not one person that I didn't like. There was one woman, the only woman and myself. She worked middays. She was a personality. You could hear the laughter in her voice. When she laughed, it was beautiful. When she was out live at clubs, people gathered around her because she drew people in. She had that magic, and it was real. And that's what I liked. Her real voice. Some people will say, hey, I got to get into my radio voice. And when people say that, it throws me off. I'm like, what? Some women think you have to be sexy to be on the air. I remember I had a program director. He said, baby, you're a woman. You don't have to sound sexy. You already do. Women shouldn't try to sound sexy. So I always tell my students, be uniquely you. You don't have to have a great voice. It's what you do with your voice. It's what you say. So my first day on the job was like every day. I went in with butterflies. I loved what I was doing. I had fun. I enjoyed the music. But traveling from Baltimore to D.C. by train started getting a little rough on me. And I remember I would get off midnight to 6 a.m. I would get off at 6 a.m. At 5:30, my program director would come in. I was hanging on by a string. And one morning he came in. I actually fell asleep. But I had a long Luther Vandross record on that was about 8 minutes. And just before the record was over, he came in and he woke me up and he startled me. And that was it. That was it. I didn't get in trouble because I didn't have dead air. But when I went to another job, it happened. I had dead air. Program director came in. I was asleep. Got fired. And that was it. That was it. It was a good fire. I was glad to be gone.
And so what do you learn about yourself as you're kind of developing your voice and your on-air persona at that time?
Well, I did a lot of observing. Because I was always a younger one then in the pack. I would observe how the midday personality, when it changed from a woman to a man, how well these two men blended and got along well. They played off of each other so well. The news guy was absolutely amazing. The older gentleman who did middays, he had a magic with him. He would deliver whatever he was delivering, but his magic was segueing between one song and what we call recorded drops, which is station ID. If it says you're playing a Michael Jackson song, you're listening to 88.9 WEAA. He blended it so well together, there was never a hiccup or dead air. And I try to tell my students, because now we have the advantage of putting things in automation where one song will play after the next. But the songs don't always end where the next element fires. And so I may be sitting in the next room and listening to them, and I'll get up because I hear a pause, which is dead air. And I'll tell them, as long as you're in here, make sure you have it in manual. That way you're hitting the next element before the song actually dies out. And that's very important because it all goes together. If you're talking, if you're playing music and you're identifying the station with station drops, it has to all come together. It's like watching TV. When it fades to black, you're like, Yeah. So we try to avoid that.
Yeah. And can you talk to me about some of the differences that come with working at a commercial station versus a public radio station?
Huge difference. I didn't understand that until I came to a public radio station. Mm-hmm. And I had been in the business for over 20 years. Coming back to Morgan, even listening to it, I would say, why do they play the same voice for this or that. Why are their commercials so short? So, and then it's the dollar value as well. Who supports you? We have to do annual fund drives to get the financial support that we need, and also the involvement of our community is different. Commercial radio station is just what it is. A commercial is something that clients pay for, and that supports the growth, financial growth of the radio station. So the difference is in public radio, what we would call commercials, we call underwriting. Clients underwrite to have their product on the air, but they pay for it as well. And the commercials are not 30 seconds as it is in public radio. They're 30 to 1 minute or 15 seconds if you're doing a sponsorship in commercial radio. Commercial radio, nothing is given away. Everything is paid for. In public radio, we have a challenge in getting people to invest in us financially as they do in commercial radio. But they may get more here and pay less, but they rather go and pay more and get less because they think the audience is bigger. And that is the difference. And then the difference here is that we wear so many hats. In commercial radio, you have a person that archives music. You have a program director. You have a promotions director. You have a promotions team. You have general manager. You have sales managers, a sales team, someone who does nightclubs. In public radio, we wear all the hats. We wear all the hats. Fortunately, we have some people who are just excellent at what they do, and they may be our marquee personalities, but they wear a heavy hat and carrying the load of reaching out to the community. Commercial radio will do things that they say, hey, we're giving back to the community. During the holidays, they may have a toy drive or coat drive. They may bring people in to a concert, but all of that is paid for. Our coat drives are donations. Our toy drives are donations. They may partner with a box store. We may not. If we can, we will, but it's a lot easier for them because they have a whole sales team that goes out and build these networks of companies where we don't have that advantage all the time. Which is funny. My old job offered me a position in sales, which was funny to me. But so that is the difference. And the difference, too, is that we massage what we do a little bit more. One of my coworkers had a client, and he said, well, we have students doing our commercials, and they're not as good, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I work very hard with my students, and because people worked with me in the past, so I can pass it on. When I talk about how news was given, how colorful it was, how in-depth it was, or stories of Mary Carter Smith's hour. We have a studio dedicated to Mary Carter Smith here at WEAA. So my students, I try to make sure they color what they say. When this person said, we're not as good as the people across town, I re-examined the staff that I had on the air, how I instructed them, and then I compared the same commercials we did, it's the same underwriting we did to their commercials. I heard better from us because we gave more. They can run through it. They may mispronounce words. They may not have the energy and the inflection, but with us, we do. I always tell my students, everyone comes in, they want to work in audio production or they want to be on the air. It's not enough positions for people to be on the air. I have one student right now who's exceptional at everything. We have to work on building her personality, but if the personality is not there, then it's not there. You can't make a person a personality if they're not. And I believe that strongly. Some people are just thrown on the air. I was on my way home one day and I heard someone. I was like, who is that and why? Yeah.
So I want to talk about how you made your way back to WEAA after spending years working in commercial radio. What brought that transition?
I worked in commercial radio for a number of years, satellite radio. Satellite radio was amazing to me before I get back to WEAA. Because satellite radio, I was able to go back to old school. I worked on a channel called Radio Amore, which aired in Milan, parts of Asia, and Africa. And I worked 2 different channels. One was a love channel, one was an oldies channel. And there was a gentleman here, I can't remember his name, but I can see his face. Oh, my God. When you're talking about oldies of the 50s, 60s, I don't even know if he did 70s, maybe 70s. He gave me a compliment one day. And I live with that today. But because it was coming from someone that I admired from afar. And he did pop radio. And at the time, I hated pop music. Couldn't relate to it. But at World Space Radio, it was just that. We played music from everywhere. I became a fan of different groups. And I knew that, wow, I said, this song originated from them? Not Tina Turner and Ike? No? What? So I learned a lot, and it was nice to know that I was being broadcast in these other countries, but I couldn't hear it here in the United States. And so when that station actually folded, that company folded, World Space Satellite Radio folded, it was such a great place, and all of my old school friends and buddies from other radio stations, people that I admire, were there. When that company folded, I think I came from Atlanta to work at World Space, and Atlanta, Raleigh. When it folded, I don't know where I was in the meantime, but I never got out of the business. One time, I got out of the business, which brought me to WEAA. I started selling. I was working in the business, but I quit. I was working at a station across town that I was very successful at, but I quit the station because I did not want what I felt like was harassment and control of a program director. I wanted to come in, do my job. I worked really hard. I was always at work. But when you get sick and someone questions, is she really sick or not? And you come to work and they want to send you home because you're so sick, they want someone to drive you home. But yet they don't believe you when you call in. And then I was into this modeling thing with this particular job across town, where one weekend I couldn't come to work because it was an $800 gig for Amtrak. So I was on the set all day long. I called in. They would not accept my calls. I went to the station and called. They picked up. And the response was, oh, yeah, we got your message. And so I begin to see if you work hard, you're dedicated, some people will try to take advantage of that, not knowing that you have a strength and power within you that says, I'm not going to tolerate this. And that is who I am. So I quit that job. The day that I came back from vacation and bereavement, and I quit my job. And the day that I quit, the program director said to me, you don't have to leave. It's just that you walk around a lot. Just stay in the studio. You could be anything you want to be. He didn't want me to leave because he knew the value of who I was. I had a great network of business people that invested in me and my voice and what I did. Commercials that really sold product. But I left. I went into the insurance business. Studied, took my insurance exam, started selling insurance. And it was I wanted to work here 1 hour, I think it was 1 hour a day. Yeah, 1 hour a day. But the general manager at the insurance company said, I wouldn't have invested all of this time with you if I knew you were going to go back to radio. And he really basically gave me an ultimatum. It's either them or me. Well, I just came from that. I just came from somebody trying to control me, and I wasn't going to accept it from the next person. I gave him my resignation. I started pulling from my 401k to take care of myself in the interim. I worked 1 day, 2 hours a week or something like that over here. And then eventually that grew into being on air full-time. And when I was on air full-time, I worked with my present boss, and I like to call him boss, but he doesn't like that name. But he's also a friend. Only 2 or 3 people earned that in my career of 30-plus years. That was 1 woman and 2 men, and Robert Shahid is that third person. Then I got my own show, Mornings with Mykel, and time has changed a couple of different times, but I think one of the hardest things is marrying a person with someone because you think they'll be good together. Being in the morning show is having a relationship with a person, and you all have to be on the same page. And so I've worked with people that were fun. I learned a lot about jazz working with Robert, and then I moved on. I worked with a young lady. That was fun and energized. And then by myself, and now with students. Working with students is a little bit different because they hear music differently. They think you should be playing rap. They think you should be playing the latest Nicki Minaj song. I'm like, we have to study the audience. So being in insurance brought me back to WEAA, and that was it.
And about what year did you come back?
I've been here for 11 years now. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Because I was reading in the Spokesman that like 2017 seemed to be a very kind of transformative and transitional year for the station where, there was a lot of new kind of professional staff hired, new programming. So I'm just curious about like when you started your show, Mornings with Mykel, how were you thinking about structuring that as far as, you have this established voice, but also WAA has a very specific audience. Can you just talk me through kind of your strategy for that show?
Well, actually, my strategy for the show, Dean Wickham said to me, he said, can you put together an air check of what the morning show would sound like with you? I did. He accepted it. And it was R&B, neo, soul, and the classics with some special features. That started at 6 a.m. with one other person, or 2 other people. And when we split and they began to change time slots from different talk shows changed, they tried to do a news format in the morning, I think, with talk. And so they switched people around. So they moved me from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. I kept the same format, and I rolled. I kept the same format of neo soul, R&B, and classics with special features. Some of my special features is Spotlight on Women in Music, the Word of the Day, and also Black Facts and Black and Missing. Students do 2 of my features, Black and Missing, Black Facts, and then everything else is within the program. Spotlight on Women in Music is my baby. I absolutely love it because I like the research. I like the writing and how I deliver that. So I won't share that with anybody else. But I have one student who's an amazing writer and was actually awarded for doing something like that. They did a research on women in hip-hop. And this young lady said to me a couple of semesters ago, she said, Miss Mykel, I want to be on the air. I want to be on that segment. I said, I want you to write it. She wrote it, and when the students won the award, she was receiving an award because she wrote the entire script. All they did was put the voices in. We had another student who edited it together. He was amazing. So our students are doing well. We had another student. I call him the young Howard Cosell. He does sports. And there was an opportunity for an interview to interview Kevin Hart, Taraji P. Henson, Terrence Howard, so many established actors. And so we did a Zoom split screen, had another student produce the interview in split screen. We had it on the teleprompter downstairs, the large drop screen. He said, that's the most amazing thing I've ever done. He said, I'll remember this for my life. And it was a story that wasn't about sports, but Muhammad Ali. It was about this purse that was stolen in Atlanta for the fight of Muhammad Ali and George Foreman, I think. So that was very interesting for him. And that was big for us, too, to have him on screen with all of those artists. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I might be going all around, though.
This is great. It's giving a lot of context for, because we talk to so many stations and, every HBCU is different and every station has a different relationship mm-hmm. with being kind of a training center for mm-hmm. students. So I think it's important to hear kind of your specific reflections on what that looks like here. But I do want to ask, mm-hmm. For people who maybe haven't heard your show, you talk about Black women women in music, mm-hmm. Black and Missing, and Black Facts. You talked a little bit about your Women in Music segment, but can you tell us what Black and Missing is and kind of how that came about as mm-hmm. well as Black Facts?
Black and Missing came about because of the imbalance of missing persons, Black and white especially. You will not get oftentimes the major TV coverage, and a lot of sex trafficking is going on. I think about the communities these people may be from. I think about how their families are impacted mentally. When I see kids leaving school and walking home or getting off the bus, I'm wondering who's meeting them, how far do they have to go, will they be safe? I have young people in my family, little kids. And so I want the word out there, and I want us to really be engaged in that. One of my students, the very first semester when we started doing Black and Missing, she was amazing because she paid attention to detail. She was here every day to give that story 5 days a week. As we went on and she moved out of it, she did it for a couple of years, and I had to bring in other students starting last semester. They dropped the ball. One student was good, but, it's like, okay, if this airs 5 days a week, you come in 2 days a week, that means you have to set it up for the rest of the week. So because it was becoming inconsistent, I had to revamp it and put it on pause for a moment and say, when the next student came, who came in as a volunteer and slayed everything, when she got the opportunity to do something, she did well in producing one of the talk shows. She does well in that. But my Black and Missing, I said, it's 5 days a week. I only have one piece from you. Where are we for today, tomorrow? Well, Miss Mykel. So I told her, I said, I know you want this, and I want it for you, but I need you to be hungry. So I'm going to take you off of it until I can see that you're ready with consistency. I said, you're a young Black lady. You could be missing. Somebody you know could be missing. Don't you know how important this is? And so I come down not hard, but with sincerity and sternness, because it's important. And if they don't see it, if someone's waiting for Black and missing and they don't hear it, they're like, oh my God, what are they doing? What are they doing? I'm donating my money because blah, 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 and they're not doing it. For Black Facts, I had a student, very religious. They would be in this room talking religion if they weren't working. I would walk in and I would sit in on their spiritual conversations. But when it came to him delivering Black Facts, he became a storyteller. He's an entrepreneur, very spiritual young man, comes back and visits every now and then, will ask if you need me for anything to speak to your class, I will. I was amazed at how he delivered Black Facts. When he left, I did some replaying the Black Facts, and then I gave my own Black Facts. But this particular time, this semester, at WEAA for our Fall 25 semester, we have a young lady by the name of Blair Dyer. Mic drop. She is a storyteller. She did a story on Black men and strokes. I had the phones ringing, blah, 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 blah. Men were calling in. Can you play that at least every day? No, I can't play it every day. I will repeat it. She did a story on how freed black slaves were chased to this desolate, remote part of Mississippi, and they fell in some kind of ditch where they died. Men separated women and children. And in this place where the bodies still float, grew peaches. And I remember hearing the story, but I couldn't find it because I had the wrong state. And they said the peaches were so big and beautiful that people who knew where they grew from wouldn't buy them or eat them because it was the bodies of people that grew where the peaches grew, the bodies where people died. The way she told this story made you want to cry. The way she told the story on Black men and strokes touched men, which is hard to do. When I was in Raleigh, North Carolina, I did a thing called True Confessions. I worked in the evening, and that's when I discovered there was something different about me. It was very sensual. When the lights were low and the music was slow, a sensuous part came out. But it didn't offend women, and it turned men on, and women were relating to me. I had people call and say different things. I had a man call and say, hey, I'm trying to get back with my family. I said, what did you do? I had relations with my uncle's wife, and I'm a paraplegic. And then I had a young girl call me, and she was crying on the phone, and she was asking me something. And I said, what'd you do, break up with your boyfriend? She said, no, I'm HIV positive. So we talked about that on air. Maybe I didn't air the voice of the young girl, but I told the story. So when you're out in your community, you're away from the microphone, you're not in the studio, even here in Baltimore, and you're talking, and someone says, hey, Mykel. I'm like, hey, how you doing? And you don't know who they are, but they know you. Maybe 2 weeks ago, I was at I'm a DIY person, so I was at a store looking for lights, and this woman walked up to me as I was leaving the aisle. She said, are you Mykel Hunter? I said, yes, because she recognized me from online. I said, I'm not talking so. And she told me about how much she loves the show. She said, it's the music that you play and what you say, and then you'll play a song right behind it that works. I told my student, who's the producer of the show, I said, whenever you play a Black fact, I want you to play a song behind it that supports that black fact. If it's something that says when Josephine Baker was a kid, she was rejected, blah, 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 blah. And she didn't know that her black skin, blah, 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 blah. So play Mickey Guyton, Black Like Me, and see what she's saying. I said, your song has to be as emotional as the piece. And so if we do Black and Missing, we may play Gil Scott-Heron, and he's singing something about the children, or Marvin Gaye. When you come out of commercials, because we are an adult station, don't bring in Chris Brown unless it's residuals or something hot that everybody can relate to. Don't bring in something by SZA. Bring in a classic. That's where you place your classics. So my students have learned how to place music in the system, and I'm grateful for that. And I see how really engaged they are when other shows say, Mykel, I want her. Okay. I talk to my student, you're being requested. And so they have to move away from me because I share all of them. And I just want them to be great.
Yeah. And I want to talk about kind of your students a little bit more, just because you were also a student here, and you talked about how you've seen kind of the culture shift in Baltimore as a whole when it comes to kind of how generations relate to each other. And I'm sure that you see that on campus with your students now. Can you talk a little bit about the culture of the student body now and the students that are in the station now, and what do you do to try to kind of relate to them?
I had one student, she was a volunteer, and she said, you dress young like us. I'm like, I'm just dressing. But anyway, I stay in my place as an adult. I try not to be overcompensating in passion. When I say passion, coddle them. I let them find their passion. What I see in the last 2 years was different when I first started. I had students that were more aggressive, students that would gaslight, BS all the time, were rude, students that were of a different culture, and it seemed to have changed, or maybe I changed on how I deal with the students today. Things that I didn't tolerate, I was very vocal about. Somebody said to me one day, because I came from commercial radio, so I'm pretty much organized. Someone said to me one day, Mykel, you're too much. And I just took it, sat back, and said, you know what? I'm trying too hard. I am too much. And I assessed myself and what I was doing. And I had to look at, not only are these my students, they're the station students. So I had to work within the professional realm of everyone else and how they related to the students. And that improved, and it's just been different. The students that I've had in the last couple of years have made so much progress. We've had people move into professional positions with the city of Baltimore. I have two communications, two media talent that worked at WEAA for a year or more, who went into communication roles with the city. I have one student that comes over now. She's in graduate class here. She said, Miss Mykel, she said, not only am I working as a communications, I can't remember her exact position, director, but she's also directing the cheering squad at Morgan. I said, you had a whole bunch of contacts. You could have done this just by calling on your contacts. She said, well, I didn't because you pulled me off air because I went around you to do that. I said, yeah, you weren't ready, so I had to talk to the person who put you there and say, this is not the way we're going to do it. We're going to take her from the ground to moving in every direction. We had a homecoming event where there was a shooting a couple of years ago. The day after that, I had a student come in that I interviewed on the air who was in the vicinity. She was in the vicinity. We put a news team together so they could actually do a news show. We had a local TV station knocking on the door. Can we speak to them? Can we speak to them? No, no, no. You cannot. And these students became just magical. Magical. One is an engineering student who's a brainiac. I love this guy. Miss him. And 2 out of the 3 is now employed with commercial media. Another student, the year before, everyone absolutely loved her. And I said, she's going to be great as a producer. This young lady worked for the Spokesman and over here, TV. Another student that worked with us last semester in our news department, she was given to me as a correspondent when they were away remotely for a conference. And the professor who had her do a live piece on my show, I said, I like her. I want her. He said, okay. She came. I worked with her. Her challenge was she's not from here. So certain streets that she's not familiar with, like you hear on TV news, they may say the street name wrong, but eventually they get it. We had to work with her on pronunciation, and now she's reporting for the Baltimore Sun. She has a great live TV presence. I love her. She said, Mykel, I'm coming back this semester. I said, okay. I texted her, didn't hear from her, saw her. She said, well, I'm working. I said, yeah, but you should have just told me that. She's busy, and she's doing a great job. But I want to make sure that she remembers that she has to come back and share with the students that want to be where she is. And that's it. They're all growing, and we're very happy.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you talk about seeing...
I didn't tell you about Spotlight on Women in Music, though.
Oh, please do.
Okay. Like your shoes. Spotlight on Women in Music, when I was working as a co-host with my now supervisor, manager, boss, Robert Shahid, I wanted to add something of my own to the show because he was such a jazz enthusiast and I wasn't. Play me some Patty Austin, Phyllis Hyman, I'm good. But I wanted something, so I started doing a feature on women in music. And it grew to Spotlight on Women in Music. And I can dissect that any way I want with the supporting facts. Today, I replayed one of the classics, which was Big Mama Thornton. A lot of people don't know that so much of her music was copied, imitated, and duplicated, and who she was. When I saw Big Mama Thornton, I said, why is she dressed like that? Why does she have on a cowboy hat and a plaid shirt and pants? Because, women were more glamorous back then. But she embraced who she was. She didn't live off the royalties of her music. The record company did. Elvis Presley did. Janis Joplin did. But when you look at her as someone who suffered from drinking, Elvis Presley, an addict, Janis Joplin, an addict, they all were wealthy addicts, not Big Mama Thornton, who shared the wealth through the record companies who gave them the wealth. So, and then you listen to stories like, I wonder why, and I wonder what happened to Phyllis Hyman. So we talk about all of those things, and you'll say, oh, Mykel, thank you. And some of the stories I can actually say when I was there, when Phyllis Hyman walked into the station. I was a huge Phyllis Hyman fan. And when she walked into the station, I ran over to the AM station because she was being interviewed there. I worked on the FM side, and the guys, her friends, were all there, and I was like, I almost melted into the wall when she started telling her stories, because the glamorous woman that I thought I was going to see and hear wasn't there. She was chasing something else, and that something else was what destroyed her, depression and everything else. When I read her story, when I was a student here at Morgan, I said, wow, I never got stood up for the prom, but I can imagine how that would feel, because I was so tall and skinny that guys wouldn't choose me because I was taller than them, because there was a standard. And it was just kind of interesting. And when Phyllis Hyman died, I remember being in Atlanta. I was working in Atlanta then, and one of my friends from Baltimore had just seen her at Carter Barron Amphitheater. And I remember her saying, Mama's got something new coming out. And I was getting my life, okay? Phyllis Hyman fan, loved her. And when I got that phone call, I'll never forget, it was raining cats and dogs that night. When I got that phone call, I hung up, and I went to my bedroom and I cried as if I had lost a good friend or a family member, because I thought she was beautiful. I thought that she really could deliver a song. And then when I saw her story, to know that she was bipolar and that there were issues, and different program directors had different experiences. I remember another program director who I was very close to told me the behind-the-scenes story of Phyllis Hyman, and my heart dropped. I was like, oh, God, I won't share it on this conversation. And then I saw her again at Constitution Hall in D.C., and she was very bloated, and I could tell that, it was either medication or non-prescribed medication. And she was walking in the venue with no shoes on. And I said, wow. And when she came out, she kept going backstage. I wound up leaving for the same reason I left a concert that Natalie Cole was doing. Natalie Cole, I was working my first radio job, and I was a plate of music, so I wanted to see her. She was so gone that she was singing Lucy in the Sky. She had on a green jumpsuit. When she came back up, she was singing almost on her knees. When she came back up, the audience was gone. I may have been the only person in there. And I was sitting back like, I was young. I didn't know what I was experiencing, but I knew something wasn't right. And then I saw her again. Boy, she had rehabilitated. And there was a split screen of her and her dad. It was a beautiful concert, beautiful. But when you see artists like that, and you're playing their music and you can share their stories, it's something else. I've never told the story of Natalie Cole on Spotlight on Women in Music, but I remember telling the one on Phyllis, and I got a phone call saying thank you for sharing your personal experience. So I try to give facts and conversation about artists that people don't know. And I'll ask Robert Shaheed, Robert, what about this person? I'll ask somebody else, and can you tell me, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll read my stories, and then I'll begin to write the story to deliver, complemented by some of the music that they play. And it's just in the delivery of how the story is told.
Yeah, I mean, from all of the parts of your show that you've talked about, the programming itself and how you come up with ideas and write those stories, like, it sounds like you have an incredible reverence for Black culture, Black history, Black music, and the desire to kind of share that with your listeners and the broader community. And you also have continuously talked about seeing specific things in your students and investing in what you see and doing not only what they want you to do, but what you understand is going to be like the best and most kind of productive path for them, and kind of ushering that along. And all that makes me think about is WEAA stands for We Educate African Americans, and like that is exactly what you're doing on such a large scale here. And so I'm just wondering if you can reflect on what it means to be doing that kind of work specifically at an HBCU radio station.
It's very important because it's empowering for the students. What I didn't recognize when I first started is that students have challenges outside of the home. They may have mental challenges. They may be extreme introverts. I had one student that people thought he was different, that he was odd. And there was something about him that was curious to me. I didn't know what it was, couldn't put my finger on it. In addition to that, he was very private. It might have been a pride thing. I don't want them to know that I had this challenge. And so one day I walked into the very room we're sitting in, and I said to him, I questioned him about something. He said, "It's for medicinal purposes, Miss Mykel." I said, okay. And so I left. Whenever he was around me again, that particular issue started dissipating. But what started coming forward was this person's level of comfort, where he would be in my office working. I have a student desk there. He would be in there working, but when the other students came in, he would leave. I would say, "Why do you leave when the other students come in?" He said, "Too many people." He would go some other place where he would be alone. If there were too many people there, he would leave. But he became a people person because we have something we call live remotes. He was at every live remote with audiences. If it was a 5K run, if it was a giveaway for back to school, or a food drive, or anything, he was always there. He would participate in games. He would bring people up to talk. And so I saw him developing into a person who didn't start with me on the same level. And so when I saw him grow, I began to see more and more of those type of students. I have one student that I said, okay, she wants to do, I don't know. We have to find her passion. He became a people person. That was his passion, but he really wants to be an engineer. The other young lady, I didn't know what her passion was because she would just laugh all the time, maybe nervous energy. But I would laugh with her because she's funny. She has a great personality. And she said to me one day, she said, "Miss Mykel, I want to do audio engineering. Now that we've finished this," she'll come in and say, "What are we doing next? What am I learning today?" I said, "I have something for you." And she was a challenge. Not because she was difficult to deal with, but there were other challenging issues that we discreetly discussed briefly. Discussing it briefly was enough because I had been there before. So now we're both in seventh heaven. There's another student that wants to be part of this. An instructor brought that person up and said, they want to work here. I said, "What do you want to do?" They said, "I want to be on the air." But they wouldn't look at me. They were like this, and they just constantly laugh, laugh, laugh. I said, "What's your name?" They laugh, laugh, laugh. I looked at the instructor. I said, "Why did you bring them here?" And the instructor said, "Well, they want to do this." The person came back again by themselves. They said, "Okay, this is what I want to do. I want to be on the air." And I thought about someone that I worked with in the early stages of my career who had Tourette's. Off mic, His Tourette's was extreme. On mic, I was like, oh my God, why isn't every radio station in the world picking you up? So that wasn't a closed door for me. The challenge is, where does this person's passion lie? So when we find their passion, we're able to grow their passion, and then what they want to do, we combine them. So that person who can't give you eye contact, who just laughs, came in different the second time when they came in by themselves. I said, okay, I don't have room for you this semester, but what I will do is let you shadow me. You come in, you follow me, and we'll get you going for next semester. Well, they didn't come back. And that was that. I have a freshman, and I said, I want you to come in. I don't have room for you. Same thing. She came back a couple of times and boom, gone. So I consider that when they do want to come back, because that shows me your commitment. This internship program for WEAA in our Student Learning Lab is very serious, because these students are going on to professional careers, and I treat them as professionals. Don't give me a lot of excuses why you can't do this, why this isn't done. Do it. I have one student who will come in every day for his assignment. I told you about that earlier. And it drives me insane. Finish what you started. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk kind of personally about what makes Morgan State and this station special to you and special to the community? We, like I said, work with HBCU radio stations all over the country that have public radio stations, and I think sometimes, people have the instinct to flatten, the HBCU experience to one thing, but we recognize that, they're all diverse and different in their own ways.
Sure.
Talk to me about Morgan.
I think with Morgan, I have to go to our president, President Davis, and even the president before him, Richardson, when I was a student here, how much they personally invested in their energy, how present they were on campus among students. They had an open door. President Davis will go to the extreme to support the programs at Morgan, to support the institution overall and the student body. He invests in the best staff to grow the student body and the community. And when I when I look back, I remember a student doing a special project on Northwood Shopping Center. And I remember as a student here, it was before the integration at Northwood Shopping Center. There was segregation before me. When I was here, there was a place called the Haven Lounge. All students would go there if we were old enough to sit in the lounge, and that was the spot. Only black business there that I can remember. But I remember when that closed for various reasons, and how the buildup of Northwood Shopping Center is. So this particular student and I, she had a project. I took her and maybe two other students to do a project on Northwood. They talked about the segregated theater, the wall that separated the community from the shopping center, how we weren't able to go into the theater in certain stores. I remember the Heck Company being there when I was a student, and where it is now, the pride in going to Northwood Shopping Center to see some of the stores that are there, some of the black-owned stores, how you're treated, and then some of the faces. The students now have a whole new world for them. When they go into places that look like them, and they patronize places that grow their community. However, I went into this store. I'm probably, I don't eat chicken with a bone. I'm a chicken tender person. But I went into this store to get chicken for my family. And I saw on the board that said 40-piece picnic basket. The word picnic bothered me because of the connotation to it. So I said to the manager, I said, I'm looking at your menu. There's a problem with that word. And I told him, I said, it has a negative connotation to black people. And he said, we're going to have a new board in here soon. Okay, I went back. Board is still there. The word is still there. Came back again. They have TVs up there. They have a menu, but they still have that word. So personally, I don't patronize the store, but I'll go and check every now and then. But I make sure my students know certain words. And I love these students because they teach me, they give back, and I give as much as I can to them. One student told me one day, and it was very good. This is around the same time when someone told me I was too much. The student said, you can be overbearing. I said, how so? And he told me, he said, you'll give me work and then you'll come back to check to make sure it's okay. Some people need it, some people don't. But it taught me how to pace myself with the students. The one student that I said had some challenges, I checked on her one day, gave her this assignment. After she said, so what are we learning next? When I came back to check on her, she said, she took a deep breath like, here she come again. So I was like, okay, let me get out. She's got it. Today I'll get a chance to sit with her to see where we are. And I'm just enjoying them. I really am. I'm enjoying their energy, what they want to do. My students will come in and work on their own. And it's just a plus for not only WEAA staff and students, for the School of Global Journalism and Communication. The dean, Jacqueline Jones, knows all of the students by name. I'm like, you know her? She said, yes, Mykel, I know who you're talking about. She came in one day during our drive. She said, Mykel, she said, I just want to say thank you because we have employed more students since you've taken over, as it was a position that was created. I saw a need. I kind of started reaching out, blah, 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 blah. And she said, we've employed more students professionally now that we have you in this position. And when I look around at the professors, students will come and say, oh, I love Professor. I said, I love her too. I love Professor. I said, that's my guy. So we all get together because they're learning from what I call across the hall. And it all comes together as one big picture of success for their future. And I love it.
Yeah. What do you think is the most important piece of advice that you give to students when they enter the station? Like if they're just starting out?
My thing is to learn everything. Don't come in saying, I want to be on the air. You can say it, but that doesn't mean you're going to be on the air. But learn everything, multitask, learn how to insert music, learn how to edit, learn how to work outside of one program into multiple programs. You may be on a music show today, next week you may be on a talk show. So I may ask you to produce a segment. I may ask you to write a news story. Be able to multitask and, don't get caught in a box, because normally when people get caught in a box, I can't use them. I really can't.
Yeah, and kind of speaking more reflectively, excuse me, if you're thinking about, the future, maybe once you're done working here, 30 years down the line, how do you want to be remembered at WEAA?
As someone who made an impact, as someone who taught, where these students can walk away and say, I remember that. I had a student this past summer who worked in Boston at a TV station. She sent me a text about something. She said, what do you call it when we do this? And I told her. She said, what is this equipment called? Adobe Audition, that's what you worked on. And she was doing a story. She had the camera set up. And I said, are you doing your own audio video? She said, yes. She said, but I remember you told me blah, blah, blah. And so those are the kind of stories I want to hear. I want to hear an impact that WEAA made a difference in their life or their career. Not only do I think we're making an impact on students' chosen area of study, but I think we're making an impact on their person. The student that I said where people thought he was different, you could not reach or figure out what it was about him that was different, but he was not a throwaway. The student that comes in and laugh, and just want to be on the air may have a great voice, may have something to offer. I really want to know. So when they come back next semester, they'll be doing an audition to see if there's a fit. I have a student that is co-hosting right now, she's off the air now, but she does Wednesday and Thursday. I need a replacement. That could be the person. I don't know. But I would like to be remembered as someone who really, if I had to describe myself, I would say that I am real and that I care about you without you even knowing. And that's it.
And so we're here with the HBCU Radio Preservation Project, and our goal holistically is to document and preserve the history and impact that stations like WEAA have had on their communities. Can you reflect on just kind of what you think about that ethos and why it may be important to preserve not only what's going on now, but how we all got here?
Because WEAA represents community, it represents opportunity. When I first started doing the student takeover, it was maybe 2 years ago, and it was during the holiday. And we got stuck with something. I said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do the student takeover. The student takeover has become now something that people look forward to. When the woman I ran into when I was doing my DIY shopping, she said, hey, I asked her about what she thinks about the students. She said, I like the students. She even named one of the students that's on the air. She said, I really like her. She said, but what I don't like is when they start playing their own music. She said, then I get lost. I said, okay, thank you. And so I think I answered your question.
You did.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah, those are most of the questions that I have for you. Thank you so much for making the time today. But before I let you go, I'd just like to ask if there's anything that we didn't talk about that you think is important to share, either about the station itself and your students or about you personally.
Boy, I could talk forever. But one of the things I try to impress on my students is networking. Have a network. So one of the exercises we do after everyone comes in semester, they get a little settled. I'll invite them to a conference. Meet me in the conference room. We have a meeting. We play this game where one person will stand up and everyone will put in writing, we tag them with a comment of who they think they are. How do you feel about this person? This person makes me laugh. This person is a leader. This person is good at audio production. I want them to produce my show. So we do that with every student. And so at the end of that session, I always say, when you feel bad, pull that out and look at it and see what people really think about you. I said, when I open one of my desk drawers, I have all of these tags that say different things about me that you all wrote, and it will help me with my day. And so that is one of the things that we do. I also say to students, it's easy to listen to you when people can feel you. Even if you're talking about a shooting or people want to know that you're authentic. People want to know that you're someone of authority. If you're doing a music show, don't come on if you're a woman sounding sexy. Don't come on. We had a student, and in this meeting, the student and I that were the co-hosts and the other student that was invited to come in, this gentleman said, I got to get my radio voice on. I said, so he went on the mic and he started talking different. We closed the mic and we both laughed and said, what were you doing? And so I always tell them to be who they are authentically. Don't come on sounding sexy if that's not where you are. You might have a great voice, but you don't know how to use it. We'll teach you if that is your stick. If we can find that passion, then yes. There's one student who has a dynamite voice, but he will escape me and do the audio part of it. And I said, not this semester, but next semester. I want to see where you're going with this voice. You are this person who sits behind a machine and you produce other people. What if you're producing yourself and making all the money, and then you hire out what you want? He said, you got a point. I was on air when I first started here. Someone called me and said, I love your voice. Are you interested in doing audiobooks? I said, yes. That supplemented my income when I was here just 1 or 2 hours a day before they picked me up. And those kind of opportunities is what I would like for them to see, that there's multiple levels of this media thing, and it keeps growing and growing. We had our student do podcasts this semester and the summer semester. Amazing. Amazing. And one student, it brought him out because he was very, very withdrawn. And because of the challenges that I have, I know there's something different about him that he hasn't shared. But that podcast brought him out where he has done so many of them. You look forward to them. Another one talks about off the clock, things you can do to relax when your day is bogged down with work, school, study, kids. And I'm like, I need this. Another student talks about entrepreneurship, some of the signs to look for to grow your business. Another student does bear talk, where everything that's happening on campus, she's that person. So it's amazing what people do. We have one student, I can see her face. She comes in with a little squeaky voice. You have to say, huh, what'd you say, what'd you say? She gets in the studio and she does our entertainment report. Mic drop. You put her on the air spontaneously, she, what? So that's us finding their passion and them developing that passion while they're moving on to other areas. I'm not going to let that one person who does entertainment really live in that arena for their duration. A lot of students come back, and we encourage them to come back because you can't learn everything in a semester. One of the things I ask when they're coming in to fill out their applications is, are you here for your class credit, or are you here because you want to learn this aspect of media? Some will say one or the other. Class credit, they give you minimal. But sometimes you're able to pull more out of them. There was one student, I couldn't pull anything out of him. He talked in a mumble. And I was like, you're here every day. There has to be something that you can do. I'm giving you busy work because I can't find your passion. When I found his passion wasn't in radio. It was in multimedia platform production. He was a great person to develop video, but he was able to use the audio to put his video together, which was amazing. So we found that in him, but it was late in the semester because he was here for 3 credits. Learn everything. And we have to learn everything about them. I think it's very important for them to learn sales and marketing. Sales and marketing because that's where the money is. They'll go into sales and marketing, and before I know it, by the end of the day, they're back with me like, And I'll go back to that person and say, well, what happened? So as that department expands, our students are attached. We have two students now that are working in sales and marketing while working in other aspects of the station. We have one student that's working in sales and marketing, that's the right hand to our marketing director, and my voice for commercial production and Black Facts. I want you to hear one of her Black Facts. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I do listen to the show occasionally. I'm based in New York, but like for research purposes and stuff, I've been tuning in.
Wonderful.
So I've heard a couple, but yeah, please let me know. And I would be excited to listen.
Yeah, you get a chance before you leave this week. I would love for you to listen to her.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, those are basically all of what I had for you. Thank you again so much.
One thing. This is the other thing. I talked so much I lost my place. When I talked about networking and these students building a network amongst each other, I can see it. They group together, they talk together, they're tight, they leave and graduate, they're still connected. But one of the things that I told students, if you are a woman in this business, it's sometimes more of a challenge for us that we have to be kind to each other, but know who your competition is. Is it friendly competition or is it cutthroat competition? Because there's both.